so much for the insightful paper. The floor is open for questions. We have almost 15 minutes, so please. Anna and Josie, please, could you? Questions?
Anna Shirinian, it's a question for her. I'm astonished. I absolutely didn't know about this, from where they had taken the illustration and then the content of the articles. You know that you gave the examples of the 3 journals published before Pasmaveb, but there is also, I think, another example, the Tarabadum by Djemjemian again, 24-28, which is an encyclopedic, historical account of the history of the 18th century. I always thought that the sources of this encyclopedic knowledge of Djemjemian were Italian. Now you tell us that it's English or French. Not for Djemjemian, I mean, but for Pasmaveb. Then why English? That's my question.
These are only some sources of the fathers. Some of the sources the fathers used to print Pasmaveb. They especially looked at the European illustrated newspapers which circulated at their time. But there are also articles they wrote by themselves. And thanks to the alphabetical list that I showed, we can now know which articles belong to who. So it's a mixed, there are mixed sources. Some undoubtedly they took from European illustrated magazines, but some other articles they wrote by themselves.
This is a quick follow-up to the question that Professor Nashanian just made. These illustrations were obviously not the original woodcuts. Somebody made copies. I mean, it's obvious. Now, the copies were done by Italians, I'm sure. Must have been Venetians. Would you have any information about that?
No, I didn't go deeper in it, but I think that they bought the woodcuts or rent the woodcuts because they are the same. So the fathers were in contact with the other editors of the other journals, so they buy or rent. I also would like to know if some of these woodcuts are still in San Lazzaro. I don't know now.
Some of them did look identical.
No, they are identical. Maybe the colors, sorry, are not the colors because of 2 different photographs. But I compared the lines. I think they are the same.
Thank you. Very nice, very entertaining too, both papers. Thank you, both of you. The publications before Pasmaveb, did they carry some Ashkarabar, some vernacular language as well?
They are. This is a great innovation made by the Mkhitarist, another great innovation made by Mkhitarist fathers. They published their periodicals in Ashkarabar, while the first Armenian periodical, which was Azdarar, published in Madras in 1794, just for 2 years, was in Grabar, so not so accessible to everybody. Pasmaveb especially, but also the first 3 previous periodicals the Mkhitarist fathers edited were in Ashkarabar.
But predominantly Ashkarabar. Because predominantly Ashkarabar.
Totally in Ashkarabar, totally. Every articles and the editorials, everything was in Ashkarabar. They understood that the kind of language was very important to the spread of these periodicals, and they chose the Ashkarabar.
Even the scientific writings in Cosmo?
Of course. They took the inspiration from the illustrated European magazines and they reworked the article in Ashkarabar.
Well, first, I'd like to congratulate both of you and our excellent reader for excellent presentations. My question is, again, directed to Anna, and it has to do with, it's a follow-up to the earlier discussion relating to the other periodicals. You mentioned Yevana, Byzantian, and so on as possible predecessors to Pasmavet. My question has to do with the uncanny similarity between many of the things you've discussed in Astara, in Pasmavet, including copying of engravings, including translations from European and particularly British journals, with their counterpart in India, or counterparts in India, particularly Astara, as you mentioned, in Madras, 1794-96, and also contemporaneous to Pasmavet, Askasir Araratian of Calcutta. Both of them have a very heavy imprint of English or British periodical culture on them. And I'm wondering if there's any mention of that in Pasmavet. And also, my second question is about the use of language, which is quite fascinating because the conventional wisdom, as far as I remember, is that the Mkhitarists were one of the last bastions of Grapar until the very late 19th century during the Karagan Baikar, and that it seems that Pasmavet was a forerunner to all of this and decided to have articles in Ashkarabar. Although, contrary to what was said, there is some Grapar in it, as you pointed yourself, the Noderkir material is in Grapar.
Yes,
So,
that's true. But the articles are in Ashkarabar. Yes, it is so. For periodicals, they thought that the best kind of language was the Ashkarabar. Yes.
Because the goal was
To reach, yes, to reach the most wider, yes. So the idea was to spread European progress to Armenian people. And they decided that the only way to do that was to use the modern language.
Was there a conscious awareness of developments in India at the time? In the pages of Astara, I seem not to remember reading there Pasmavet.
Sorry.
Is there a conscious awareness of the India parallel as being a forerunner to what they're doing in Pasmavet? Astara and Askaser, Araratian, Calcutta, and Madras.
But Asdarar, as I said, was in Grapar.
Actually, I have a different opinion. Asdarar was mostly somewhat in Grapar, but a good many of the articles were in Jofa dialect. So they were written in vernacular by people who could barely write. So.
But the Mkhitarist fathers chose the Ashkarabar, but cleaned Ashkarabar without dialect influences. So, no, there is no, as much as I can, I studied just the first issues of Pasmavet. Pasmavet, that is a word. There are so many articles on everything, I must say. Also how to make cheese and how to for animal husbandry and everything for plants, and so it's really an encyclopedia. But no mention, as much as I know, to Asdara. No mention. I don't know if
I wouldn't. I'm overwhelmed with the presentations, historical effort. I think you excelled. I learned so many things that I never realized did exist. But I'm not a linguist. I'm a practitioner of modern Western Armenian, and my concern is basically, I I was reading Jesse's short bio. You're teaching Armenian. May I ask, is it a language or a dialect that you're teaching? And which one is it?
I have to answer. I guess a language.
Okay. Would that be Western Armenian, modern Western Armenian, or the dialect spoken in Armenia and partially in Iran? I'm putting this distinction on purpose because there's a trend among editorials that I'm reading in Armenian newspapers. They're predicting the demise of the modern Western Armenian by the middle of this century, which is sad. I am of the belief that there are exaggerations. A lot of Armenian day schools in the United States who excel in the introduction and the teaching of the modern Western Armenian versus what's
Excuse
happening.
me, if you have a question on the paper, then
No,
we have a
the
lot of time for
question is,
discussion after the...
As an instructor, the question is what kind
Well,
of
we're asking
content-
questions on the presentation, if you may.
This is actually another question for Jesse. I was fascinated by your presentation of the devices used in the publications. Have you extended how those devices are being used more currently? I'm thinking through some of the journals that I read, and now, devices that I wasn't really aware of that pull me through articles. Have you extended and analyzed that, and when do you care to comment on some of the more common devices being used currently?
Sure, I think that's a great observation that this technique is obviously not limited to any century or era or language at all. It's employed in any form that a text is presented to a reader. In that book that I mentioned, the Gérard Genette book, which has a French original and then English translation, he examines examples from all the way from Homer until the 20th century. And so you get to see this whole range of development of how different things were used in different eras, and of course, yeah, the same thing going on today in different journal forms, online, all types of things. I haven't examined that, for the purposes of this paper, but there's a lot of fruitful things that can come out of attention to that.
Thank you.
Question to Jesse. On the pictures you saw the crosses. There were acronyms. VO, GAIN, IB, V. Any idea what do they stand for? And second question, a personal, any relation with Michael Arlen?
Getting all the best questions. So the initials, which, oh, okay, it's not appearing, but, so I just ran over this briefly, but they're actually the initials of the congregation's name, which I don't remember, does anyone? Thank you so much. So yeah, 4 words of the official name. I have no relation to Michael Arlen.
Any other questions? Professor?
Jesse, is there a fine line between a paratextual and just simple illustration?
That's a good question. So it's actually interesting, in that book by Genette, he has in the epilogue, he talks about these 3 types of devices that he didn't examine, and one was illustrations. And he defines it as a paratextual device, but he says that if he'd given attention to that, the different ways that images have been used over the course of codex history, say, would require a book of equal size to the one he wrote already. So I don't know if there was more kind of behind your question that you'd like to suggest about those distinctions, but he kind of defines it as a type of paratext, but he actually doesn't discuss it at all in the book as to like ways it functions or examples from book history.
We have time for one last question.
To Anna, I'm curious, how early did the were the Ashtarapar translations? Because I picked up a book, it's The Count of Monte Cristo, but it was published in 1838, well before the Pazmavibs in 43. Pure Ashtarapar, very easily readable by any child. And when I was looking through it, it said that it was republished from 1817, something like this, if I remember it correctly. It was like 20 years later it was So how, and I know Hayar Sempakraduli was extensively in Ashtarapar, how early before Pazmavib, when did they start? I don't think it was late 1700s. How early in the 1800s? If you have any idea.
Well, as much as the periodicals are involved, it started with the first periodical published by the Mkhit fathers, who was at the end of the 17th century, 18th century, 1799. This is the year when the Ashkarabarba was used for the periodicals. As much. In the yes, but in a chronological sense. Sorry, I took my. Okay, so it was very good tune, as much as I know. 1799. This is when the Ashkarabar was used in the periodicals, and this is an innovation by the Mkhitarist fathers. Yes. So 1799.
I can't help but adding before we leave that there's been several questions about when Ashtarapar was first used, who the first writer was, why they first started using it. And Professor Mark Nishanian has addressed this question in at least two of his book publications, one being just in French, Az usage de la langue arménienne, but then the other in his book Morning Philology, which has an English translation as of 2 years ago. So if anyone's interested in that topic and finding very detailed and precise discussion of these questions, that book is a great place to go.
Thank you, Jesse. Thank you, Anna, and for a great